Nobody important? She replied, her gaze steady, unblinking. Just leaving. 2 words. My daughter's words. They didn't just cut. They tore through me. 50 years of motherhood reduced to a dismissive whisper. On Stephanie's doorstep, clutching my warm bread pudding, I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. From inside, the clinking of silverware and bright peals of laughter spilled out. I knew Doris's cackle. My ex-sister-in-law. The one Stephanie had always insisted she couldn't abide. Doris, celebrating Christmas with my family. And I, the mother, the grandmother, was being sent away like a hired hand. "I'll call another cab for you, Mom," Stephanie offered, already pulling out her phone, as if swatting away a fly. "No need," I forced out, pushing the warm bread pudding into her hands. "You keep it. My driver's still waiting." It was a lie, of course. The cab was long gone. But I couldn't bear to linger. An unwelcome ghost on Christmas Eve. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing my tears. Henry, my son-in-law, lurked a few steps back, his face a carefully blank canvas that screamed, anywhere but here. No Merry Christmas. No hug, just a hollow silence. "The kids' presents," I began, lifting the brightly colored gift bag. "Just leave them," Stephanie interrupted, a hand outstretched, dismissive. "I'll hand them out later." But I didn't. I'd chosen each one myself, wrapped them in red paper and gilded bows, even penned personalized cards for Ethan and Chloe. "I'll take them back," I heard myself say, the unexpected steel in my voice surprising me more than it did her. "When they truly want to visit their grandma, I'll give them to them then." Stephanie sighed, a sharp, impatient sound. "Fine. Whatever you want. Merry Christmas, Mom." And the door clicked shut. You must be wondering how we arrived at this. How a mother finds herself exiled on Christmas Eve, barred from her own daughter's home. I've replayed that night in my mind, searching for answers, every single day since. It began about 6 months back, when Henry landed that promotion at the tech company. Overnight, my middle daughter, the one who'd always scoffed at snobs, began to transform. Small things at first, a sharper haircut, the subtle gleam of designer labels, her cadence shifting, peppered with business jargon I couldn't grasp. "It's networking, Mom," she'd parrot, impatiently, whenever I dared ask about the dinners that had swallowed her evenings whole. Stephanie had always been the hungriest of my 3. Since childhood, she'd craved more, dreamed grander. 10 years ago, when she married Henry, they'd started in a cramped suburban apartment. Now, with his promotion, they'd purchased that sprawling house in the gated community, complete with a pool. "You'll love it, Mom," she'd promised when they moved in. "There's even a little guest room you can use whenever you want to stay with the grandkids." But those invitations to visit, they thinned out. When I called, Stephanie was perpetually unavailable. "We're hosting company executives. We have an important event. The kids have advanced English lessons." October rolled around, and I called about Christmas. "We haven't decided yet, Mom. I'll let you know." November bled into December, and still nothing. Early in the month, I tried again. "Stephanie, honey, about Christmas. Are you coming here, or would you prefer I come to you?" "Oh, Mom, we're still organizing everything," she'd reply, always. "I'll tell you later." But she never did, and I, fool that I was, simply assumed. It was Christmas, after all. Family, tradition. My oldest, Matthew, had been living overseas for 5 years. My youngest, Megan, chose to spend the holidays with her husband's family out of state. Stephanie was my last hope. my only way to avoid spending Christmas utterly alone. My apartment was modest, but it had always, somehow, welcomed everyone for the holiday gatherings. A 2-bedroom in the very neighborhood where I'd raised my children, steeped in memories and faded photographs. After my husband Paul passed 7 years ago, I'd sold the big house and moved here. More practical, they'd insisted. Less lonely, I'd prayed. That December 24th, I rose with the sun, donned my floral apron, the one Stephanie had given me Christmases ago, and began the bread pudding. My mother's recipe, learned as a girl. Dipping the bread in milk and cinnamon, I hummed carols, a quiet joy unfurling in my chest. That familiar flutter of anticipation, the thrill of reuniting with those I loved. My new red sweater, purchased just for this occasion, lay ready. "Nana, looking stylish," Ethan would exclaim, just as he always did when I dressed up. I dabbed perfume, styled my hair with meticulous care. I wanted to be radiant for the family photos. The gifts, wrapped a week prior, waited. For Ethan, the 500-piece jigsaw puzzle we'd chosen together at the mall. For Chloe, a doll she'd spotted in a magazine. For Stephanie, a necklace set from a small boutique near me. For Henry, a navy blue tie, his perennial favorite. When the cab pulled up, my heart soared. The driver, George, a gentle silver-haired man, greeted me warmly. "Heading to your Christmas dinner, ma'am?" he asked. "Yes, to my daughter's house," I beamed. "Family is everything, isn't it? My own kids are coming over today. The wife's had that turkey in the oven since dawn." We chatted about holiday traditions the entire ride. He dropped me at the community gate at 6. Mr. Henderson, the security guard, waved me through with a familiar, "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Susan." "Merry Christmas, Mr. Henderson." I walked towards house number 47, a growing number of cars lining the curb. Perhaps Stephanie had invited friends, I thought, a warm flutter in my chest. The more, the merrier. I rang the doorbell, carefully balancing the bread pudding and the gift bag, and then Henry opened the door. And everything, utterly everything, fractured. I walked 3 blocks before finding a cab stand, the gift bag now an unbearable weight. My 67-year-old legs screamed in protest, but wounded pride propelled me forward. I wouldn't break down here on the street on Christmas Eve. The cab that picked me up was driven by a young woman in a whimsical Santa hat. "Party over early?" she chirped, catching my eye in the rear view. "It never even started for me," I managed, the attempt at a smile a brittle thing. She must have seen the devastation in my gaze because she asked no more questions. She simply turned up the radio, where Silent Night was playing. A cruel, cutting irony. My apartment was dark, just as I'd left it. No one waiting. No surprise. I switched on only the living room lamp, the gift bag landing with a soft thud on the couch. In the kitchen, the fridge offered meager leftovers, a scrap of chicken, a scoop of rice. Hunger was a foreign concept. I reached for a special occasion glass, the one reserved for family celebrations, and poured the wine I'd bought to share. I drank it alone, my gaze fixed on the small artificial tree I'd tucked into the corner. I returned to the couch, pulling the gift bag onto my lap. Ethan's present, the 500-piece jigsaw puzzle we'd picked out together. "We'll put this together during your school break, Nana," he'd promised, his little voice brimming with excitement. I carefully peeled back the wrapping paper, a small act of defiance, and opened the box. A lighthouse stood sentinel by the churning sea. Ethan, always captivated by tales of the ocean. I began separating the edge pieces, a familiar ritual. One by one, I clicked them into place, the hours dissolving as Christmas Eve marched onward, utterly indifferent to my solitude. Around 10, the phone rang. Matthew from overseas. "Merry Christmas, Mom. How's dinner there?" I swallowed the knot in my throat. "Wonderful, honey. Everyone sends their love." I couldn't shatter his Christmas, too. Not that night. Then Megan called, from out of state. "Mom, are you okay? Your voice sounds strange." "Just tired, sweetie. Hosting dinner is a lot of work, you know." More lies, meticulously crafted to shield them from my collapse. Inside, I was fragmenting. I continued piecing together the lighthouse until the first hints of dawn. When the clock chimed midnight, Christmas officially arrived. And I was alone, adrift amidst pieces that stubbornly refused to connect, just as I no longer found my place in my daughter's life. The next morning, a text from Stephanie. "I'm so sorry about yesterday, but you really should have called first." Doris showed up unexpectedly and we couldn't just send her away. I read and reread those words, the phone heavy in my hand. Doris, the ex-sister-in-law Stephanie always claimed to loathe, couldn't be turned away. But I, her mother, could be. I didn't reply. Some wounds run too deep for empty apologies, for casual dismissal by text. I tucked the gifts away in the guest room closet, the one I'd once meticulously arranged for the grandchildren who now rarely came. The lighthouse puzzle remained on the coffee table, a stark, unfinished landscape. So many pieces still missing, just like the answers for what had transpired. That Christmas morning, a silent vow solidified within me. Next year, I would finally be important to myself. Perhaps I'd travel or host old friends or volunteer at a shelter. Anything would be better than being nobody important in my own daughter's house. The phone rang again. Stephanie. "Mom, did you get my text? The kids are asking about you. We were wondering if we could stop by later to pick up their presents." My gaze fell on the unfinished puzzle, the scattered pieces I'd spent the night trying to mend alone. "Of course, dear," I replied, a calm I utterly lacked. "Come whenever you like." I hung up, my hand hovering over the receiver. So many words choked in my throat, so many questions screaming to be asked. Why was I no longer welcome? When did I cease to matter? What exactly had changed? But some questions are too raw to voice, and some answers too agonizing to bear. I sat back down at the table, picking up another puzzle piece. It clicked perfectly into place, revealing a patch of sky above the lighthouse. A small victory amidst the wreckage of my morning. As I fitted the pieces, I remembered Ethan at 5. We were on the porch of the old house, assembling his first puzzle. "Grandma, what if we can't finish it?" He'd fretted, his little eyes wide with worry. "We always do, my love," I'd told him. "Just patience and a close look. Every piece has its place." He'd smiled, trusting in his grandma's certainty. Back then, I truly believed I had all the answers. The sharp chime of the doorbell jolted me back. 2 in the afternoon. Far too early for Stephanie. I quickly smoothed my hair, ran a hand over my face to erase any lingering tear tracks, and went to answer. When I pulled the door open, it wasn't Stephanie. It was Megan, my youngest, her travel bag still clutched in her hand, eyes red-rimmed. "Megan, what on earth? Weren't you in Denver?" She stepped inside, dropped the bag with a thud, and wrapped me in a fierce embrace, so tight I swayed. I caught the first flight I could. Matthew called me in the middle of the night. He heard it in your voice, Mom. He knew. I attempted a weak smile, fighting for composure. You didn't have to come, honey. I'm truly fine. Megan cupped my face in her hands, just as I'd once done with her when I needed her full attention. Mom, no more lies. Matthew called Stephanie last night after he spoke with you. She told him everything. My face flamed with shame. So the truth was out. Everyone knew their mother had been summarily dismissed from Christmas dinner, reduced to no one important. Let's sit, Megan urged gently, leading me to the sofa. That's when her gaze landed on the unfinished puzzle. Is that for Ethan? I could only nod, a lump in my throat preventing speech. Mom, she began, clasping my hands tightly. I need to tell you some things about Stephanie. Things that might clarify what's been happening. Megan explained that about 8 months prior, Stephanie had begun therapy. It wasn't solely Henry's promotion that had altered my middle daughter. It was something far deeper, etched long ago. She's working through childhood issues, Mom. Resentments she's held onto for years. What kind of issues? I asked, truly bewildered. Megan drew a slow breath. You always had a special bond with Matthew. He was the firstborn, the boy, and with me, the youngest, the baby of the house, Stephanie always felt overlooked, invisible. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow. Invisible? Stephanie? But that's impossible. I loved you 3 equally. I treated you all the same. Megan squeezed my hands harder. Mom, it's not about what you did or didn't do. It's about how she perceived it, how she felt. And now with therapy, all those buried feelings are erupting. I closed my eyes, letting the flood of memories rise. Stephanie at 7, clutching a drawing from school while I nursed newborn Megan. Later, honey. Stephanie at 12, securing 2nd place in a grueling math competition, while Matthew, that very same year, claimed the swimming championship, a full-blown party for him. For her, a fleeting congratulations. Oh, God, I whispered, eyes snapping open. Did I really do that? It wasn't malice, Mom. You were swamped, raising 3 kids, working. But for a child. For a child, it would feel like she wasn't important enough. I finished, the staggering weight of the revelation settling over me. Megan nodded, her gaze brimming with compassion. And now, with Henry's promotion, with the new house, it's like she's finally being seen, finally mattering. And I'm a living ghost of the time she felt invisible, I concluded, the last few pieces of my own puzzle clicking into agonizing place. Something like that, Megan affirmed. It doesn't excuse what she did yesterday. It was cruel, unforgivable. But perhaps it gives you a glimpse of why. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, each of us adrift in our own thoughts. Outside, the bright winter sun shone. Children's laughter echoed from the street, oblivious to the seismic shift occurring within me. What do I do now? I murmured, the question addressed more to the air than to Megan. First, she said, offering a small, strained smile. Let's eat. I'm ravenous after that flight. She paused, her eyes serious. Then, when Stephanie arrives with the kids, you two talk. Truly talk this time. We prepared a simple lunch together. Megan, always the most like me in the kitchen, prone to experimenting, to improvising. As I chopped vegetables, I found myself telling her about the bread pudding I'd left at Stephanie's. I bet the kids devoured it first, she chuckled. Ethan's absolutely obsessed with your bread pudding. The quiet act of cooking with my daughter, of simply talking about mundane things, was balm to my soul. For a few precious hours, the raw sting of Christmas Eve faded. At 4, the doorbell chimed once more. Megan met my gaze, a silent question in her eyes, a silent encouragement. "Do you want me to get it?" "No," I breathed, taking a fortifying gulp of air. "I will." When I pulled the door open, Stephanie stood there, Ethan and Chloe clustered beside her. Henry was notably absent. Stephanie's eyes were bloodshot and swollen, clearly from weeping. "Grandma!" The children shrieked in unison, swarming my legs. "My sweethearts," I murmured, bending low to truly embrace them. "I've missed you so." "We brought your bread pudding back," Ethan exclaimed, holding up the dish I'd left. "We saved it to eat with you." My eyes found Stephanie, who remained rooted to the spot, gripping her purse strap so tightly her knuckles shone white. "Come in," I managed, my voice even. "Megan's here too." Stephanie's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise, then alarm. "Megan? But she wasn't in Denver?" "I was." Megan's voice cut in from behind me. "Until I discovered our mother spent Christmas utterly alone." The air instantly thickened with unspoken accusation. Ethan and Chloe, thankfully oblivious to the raw current between the adults, darted past us to engulf their aunt in hugs. "Kids," Megan called, her tone bright but firm. "How about we go tackle that puzzle in the living room while Grandma and Mom have a grown-up talk?" They cheered, eager, following Megan, leaving Stephanie and me isolated in the entryway. "Mom, she began, then trailed off, words seemingly failing her. "Let's go to the kitchen," I suggested softly. "We can have some coffee." She followed, a silent shadow. As I prepared it, I felt her gaze, heavy on my back. When we finally sat across from each other at the small table, I realized we were both trembling. "Megan told me about the therapy," I started, choosing to be direct. Stephanie's eyes dropped to her lap. "She shouldn't have done that." "Why didn't you tell me yourself?" She shrugged, a familiar childhood gesture, one she made whenever she felt cornered. "I didn't think you'd understand." "Try me," I urged. "Please." And then, like a dam breaking, Stephanie's words gushed out. She spoke of always feeling like the middle child. Neither the special firstborn nor the cherished baby. How she'd grown up believing she had to fight for her space, prove her worth. How she'd married too young, had children too young, all in a desperate attempt to forge her own significance. When Henry got promoted, when we bought the house, it felt like I'd finally arrived. Like I was finally someone. "You were always someone, Stephanie," I interrupted, my heart twisting. "You were always my daughter." "But it wasn't enough," she cried, tears carving paths down her face. "It was never enough to earn your full attention, to make you proud the way you were of Matthew, to make you dote on me like you did on Megan." Her words were razor sharp, each one a direct hit to a vulnerable place in my mother's heart. "And yesterday," I pressed, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Why didn't you just tell me I wasn't welcome?" Stephanie wiped her tears with the back of her hand, a gesture that took me back to her at 6, after a scraped knee from falling off her bike. "I tried, Mom. So many times, but I couldn't find the words. How do you tell your mother you don't want her at your Christmas? So you chose to let me find out that way? By calling me no one important?" She covered her face with her hands. I just panicked. Doris was there, Henry's colleagues, people crucial to his career. And suddenly you show up with your bread pudding and that sweater. "And that embarrassed you," I finished, a fresh wave of pain washing over me, a pain I'd never known. "No," she cried, lifting her head, her eyes pleading. "Yes, I don't know. It was all so muddled. I just wanted to be important, for once. To be the hostess, the director's wife, not merely Susan's daughter." We sat in silence for several long moments, the only sound the distant laughter of the children and Megan in the living room. Their progress on the puzzle. "You know what's truly ironic?" I finally asked, my voice quiet. "Last night, after I came home, I kept thinking about how you were always the strongest of the three, the most fiercely determined, the bravest. Matthew had everything handed to him because he was a boy, and Megan was sheltered as the youngest. But you blazed your own trail, and I admired that beyond measure." Stephanie stared at me, genuinely stunned. "You did?" "I did. Perhaps I didn't say it enough. Perhaps I failed in countless ways as a mother. But never, not for a single instant, were you less vital to me than your siblings." She began to weep again, but this time the tears felt different, softer, laced with something akin to relief. I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. "What you did yesterday, Stephanie, it cut me to the bone. I won't pretend it didn't, but I understand there's ancient hurt beneath it, pain we need to mend, together." "Can you forgive me, Mom?" she whispered, her voice fragile. "I'm trying," I answered truthfully. "And you? Can you forgive me for making you feel invisible all these years?" She squeezed my hand, a silent promise. "I'm trying too." Just then, Ethan burst into the kitchen, his face alight. Grandma! Grandma! We found the lighthouse piece. Come see?" I met Stephanie's gaze, and she gave a faint nod. "All right then," I smiled, rising. "Let's go see this lighthouse." In the living room, the jigsaw puzzle was indeed nearly complete. Ethan, Chloe, and Megan had made astonishing progress. "Look, Grandma, just this sky piece is missing." Chloe pointed, a small empty space waiting. I sat on the floor beside them, Stephanie joining me. Together we searched for the last few pieces. "This one fits here," Stephanie murmured, snapping a blue piece into place. "And this one," I added, finding another. Piece by piece, we filled the voids. When the final piece clicked in, revealing the full image of the lighthouse by the churning sea, a strange, fragile peace settled over me. Not everything was resolved between Stephanie and me. Far from it. There were years of buried resentments to unearth, patterns to break, wounds to heal. But we had, at last, begun. "It's beautiful," Megan commented softly, admiring the finished puzzle. "Can we glue it and hang it on the wall?" Ethan asked, already planning. "Of course," I replied. "It'll be perfect there, right beside the family photos." Stephanie looked at me, a faint, genuine smile gracing her lips. "Thank you, Mom." "For what?" "For not giving up on us." The months that followed were a grueling climb. Stephanie and I began weekly therapy sessions, and in those first few, we could barely meet each other's eyes. The room thrummed with raw anger, years of built-up resentment. "You always favored the others," she'd accuse, her voice brittle. "You never gave me a chance," I'd counter, just as sharp. Our therapist, Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman with wise, kind eyes and a cascade of silver hair, patiently steered us through that emotional minefield. "We're not here to assign blame," she'd say, her voice calm. "We're here to understand how each of you felt, and how we can move forward, together." Slowly, painstakingly, week after week, we truly began to listen. I discovered Stephanie harbored deep, painful memories I'd barely registered. Like the time I cancelled her 9th birthday party because Matthew got sick, or when I missed her ballet recital because Megan had colic. Those were emergencies, Stephanie, I'd explain, my own heart aching. It wasn't by choice. I know that now, as an adult, she'd reply, her voice softer. But the 9-year-old girl just knew, once again, that she wasn't the priority. And Stephanie, in turn, began to grasp the crushing weight of her words that Christmas Eve. I never meant to hurt you, Mom. I was so consumed by my own pain. I couldn't see yours. At home, I began digging through dusty photo albums, treasured handmade cards, and forgotten drawings. Tangible proof that yes, Stephanie had always been loved, always been central. Perhaps not in the way she desperately needed, but in the only way I, with my own limitations and my understanding at the time, had been capable of showing. Henry, initially distant and visibly uncomfortable with the raw emotional landscape, eventually joined us for a few sessions. I always thought you two had a perfect relationship, he confessed, genuine bewilderment in his voice. Stephanie spoke about you with such pride. Pride? I echoed, surprised. Yes, Stephanie affirmed, looking just as taken aback by her own words. I always admired your quiet strength, Mom. How you raised 3 kids alone after Dad got sick. How you never complained, not even when I knew you were bone-weary. These small, hard-won revelations were like fragile bridges, slowly spanning the chasm that had torn open between us. In June, 6 months after that fateful Christmas, Stephanie called. Henry's taking the kids to the movies, she explained, a shy note in her voice. I thought we could have some time just for us. Dinner at my place. I accepted, of course, though a knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. The last visit to that house still felt like a fresh wound. When I arrived, Stephanie met me with an unexpected hug, a gesture that had withered between us over recent years. The table was laid with exquisite care, using the good china she'd inherited from my mother. I made bread pudding for dessert, she offered, a touch of shyness still clinging to her. It won't be as good as yours, but I followed your recipe to a T. My eyes blurred. I'm certain it's delicious. Over dinner, we talked of pleasant, inconsequential things. Her latest projects, my new neighbors, Ethan's progress at school. It was only later, as we savored the bread pudding, which indeed was exquisite, that Stephanie steered the conversation to the true purpose of the evening. Mom, she began, her voice tentative. I've been thinking. This year I'd like Christmas to be at your house, like it always used to be. I simply stared, utterly taken aback. Are you sure? Your house is so much larger, more comfortable for everyone. She shook her head slowly. It's not about the size, Mom. It's about where we feel at home. And for me, Christmas was always truly in your living room, with that artificial tree twinkling with old ornaments, with your special bread pudding, and that red sweater. A quiet, indefinable warmth spread through my chest. What about your important friends? Henry's colleagues? They can have their own Christmas, she shrugged, a lightness in her tone. I realized I was pouring my energy into impressing people who, in the end, don't truly matter. Not like family. I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine, a silent echo of that afternoon on December 25th. You know what I truly learned in all those months of therapy? I asked. What? That all of us, at some point, feel like nobody important. I felt it when your dad got sick, and the doctor spoke about him as if I were a ghost in the room. I felt it when Matthew moved overseas without a word, without a consultation. And I felt it that night, standing abandoned on your doorstep. Stephanie squeezed my hand tightly, and I felt that way for most of my life, like I was perpetually scrambling to prove my worth. I suppose the crucial difference is, now we know it. I continued, meeting her gaze. Now we can choose to do things differently. She nodded, a radiant, genuine smile transforming her face. So, Christmas at your house this year? Christmas at my house, I confirmed. And you can invite anyone you like, even Doris. We laughed, a sound that felt lighter than air, as if a monumental burden had simply dissolved. December arrived with a rush, brimming with the promise of change. My small apartment was adorned with even more care that year, each ornament placed with renewed purpose. Megan came from Atlanta a week early to help, and even Matthew promised to fly in from Portugal. On Christmas Eve, I woke early, the familiar, happy flutter in my chest returning, but this time, untainted. I pulled out my red sweater, the very same one, and began preparing my special Christmas bread pudding. The phone rang. It was Stephanie. "Mom, can I come over early to help with the preparations?" "Of course, honey. I'm making the bread pudding now." "Perfect. I'll bring the ingredients for that savory rice with cranberries and pecans you always used to make. The kids are begging for it." When I hung up, a genuine, quiet smile spread across my face. It wasn't the smile of someone who had simply forgotten the pain. Some wounds leave indelible scars. It was the smile of someone who understood that even when shattered, we possess the power to choose healing, to choose rebuilding. My gaze drifted to the framed photograph on the wall, the lighthouse puzzle we'd assembled that raw December 25th. It hung there, as Ethan had suggested, right beside the cherished family photos. A constant, silent testament that some things, once broken, can indeed be pieced back together. Different, perhaps, scarred, certainly, but whole in their own unique way. That night, as everyone gathered in my living room, Matthew with his Portuguese girlfriend, Megan with her husband, Stephanie, Henry, and the clamoring kids, I raised my glass. "To family," I said, my voice rich with emotion. "To all of us, flawed and vital, important in our own way." Stephanie raised her glass, her eyes bright and clear, locking with mine across the festive table. "To my mom," she added, her voice strong and unwavering. "The most important person in my life." It wasn't the final page of our story, nor the miraculous resolution of every problem. It was merely the first paragraph of a new chapter, painstakingly written with greater awareness, deeper compassion, and most crucially, profound truth. Because in the end, we are neither nobody important nor somebody important. We are simply human beings, imperfect, contradictory, perpetually striving to do the best we can with what we're given. And perhaps that, all on its own, is important enough.